Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben immigratieprocureur here in America, and ik wil jou help om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, if you're new to this channel, please remember to like, subscribe, share the video. If you're a returning subscriber, consider becoming a channel member. That really helps what I'm trying to do here. Now, today, I want to confront comments like this. You see, I made a video a couple of days ago, and for those of you who don't know my background, not only am I an immigration attorney, I'm a law professor, I'm an academic. I love studying, I love scholarship, I love all of this. And one of the areas that I love to focus on here in the United States, I teach constitutional law, is I love the idea and the concepts of government. And one of the things that I have said is I'm a firm believer that democracies that have universal suffrage, meaning that everyone has the right to vote, are doomed to fail no matter what. And I mentioned Socrates and many Greek philosophers who understood this, that when you give one man, one vote, when that becomes the foundation of your governance system, that system will eventually cave in on itself. And I get comments like this where people, especially in South Africa, especially blacks in South Africa, will say, well, I'm being racist. I'm being racist because I'm saying that Africans can't govern Africa. And no, that's not what I said at all. That has nothing to do with the Greek analogy, with Socrates' analogy to a ship. In fact, it proves my point. This is not about racism. The only people making this about racism or making it racist are groups like the EFF and Malema. This isn't about race. This is about a culture and an education problem when it comes to self-governance. You see, the Western concept of a state, of a nation, of this political organization is, whether you like it or not, and has been proven to be the most effective and just form of governance. It is the most functional political institution that the world has ever known. Western-style governments have given us the rule of law, have given us political representation, have given us property rights, have created the idea of secure borders. All of this was done by Western-style forms of government, and many of those, of course, being democracies. But we'll get to, in the end, why this really isn't racist, because unlimited democracy, no matter what race you are, will lead to the end of these systems, in my opinions. But these systems, when they work, right, they require education. They require a commitment to make it work. This isn't a racial problem. This is a cultural and educational problem. Because if you look at Africa, and I'm going to make many videos next coming days that make an argument for the pros and the benefits of colonialism. Because the anti-colonialist movement, anti-colonization, all of this has done more to harm continents like Africa than it has ever done to help them. Because if you look at Africa, look at what happened post-colonialism. You have a continent that is full of military coups, dictatorships, strongmen, communism. In fact, speaking of genocides, perhaps arguably more genocides than any other geographical region in the world. And when I speak about genocides, this is really tribe on tribe, so black on black. But it doesn't take a whole lot of research to find the ethnic cleansing of different tribal groups within Africa as a whole in the post-colonial period. So the problem was that instead of embracing the colonial lessons that were given to countries in Africa and tribes in Africa, and again, in a future video, I will undermine the myth that Europe's carving of borders is one of these fundamental problems. It's not. It's the failure of indigenous people in Africa to take on the lessons learned from colonialism and to create and to use that to have functioning political groups. Because what happened was instead you had this strict adherence to tribalism, this refusal to go on with the Western ideas of government. And what did that tribalism lead to? It led to, when some people were elected, to wanting when they were in power, to then only benefiting their tribe, their ethnic group, their people. You've seen that all throughout Africa. It slipped back into tribalism, back into cronyism, back into despotism, all of this. And it was done under the pretense of one man, one vote, anti-colonialism, get rid of white European colonizers, and now let's have everybody vote for me because I'm going to give you what you want. And did he give you what you wanted? No. He started to embezzle money. And he is any African dictator, any African politician, started to embezzle money, corruption. Look at South Africa. Look at South Africa. South Africa went from being a first world nation, a nuclear power, where the world's first heart transplant was conducted. All of this to now a failed state with uncontrollable crime, with political parties calling for the ethnic cleansing of Afrikaners and other people of white European descent and other ethnic minorities in South Africa. It went from a first world economy to a corrupt and failed state where leaders, after the ANC got into power, did what is the normal talking points of any of these African politicians who, again, this is not a racial thing, this is a cultural thing, and an educational thing, which we'll talk about at the end, but they ended up just taking over, lining their own pockets, and now in South Africa you don't have a infrastructure, you have no power system, you have no real functioning democracy because you allow people to spread threats and call for democracy. And again, when we talk about this not being racial, you can look at countries that have been on the brink of absolute destruction. Take Germany and Japan at the end of World War II. Now, of course, Germany is a European power, but Japan is not. Japan is not white. These countries completely transformed themselves in 50 or 60 years to become economic and democratic powerhouses from the brink of destruction. Whereas South Africa went from being a first world nation to destruction because of one man, one vote. And not because Africans, blacks, were given the right to vote, but because people who were not educated in how government works and the fear of demagoguery were given the right to vote, and it undermined the entire system. Look at Singapore. Singapore was a colony. Citizens of Singapore, native Singaporeans, I don't know if that's a term or what they would style themselves as, are not white. However, they embraced Western democratic political ideas, the economic systems, they adapted, and they became a success post-colonialism by adopting that Western style of government and idea. And be careful, don't share these views. I found this out as I was doing research for this video, and my South African friends will back me up on this, I'm sure. Was it Helen Zille, Z-I-L-L-E? A South African politician who went to Singapore and came back and said, there are some aspects of colonialism that are beneficial and lay a foundation we can build on. And she was apparently sanctioned and sent to the Human Rights Commission. That, for saying that colonization, that colonialism, laid some foundations, such as the rule of law, infrastructure, medicine, railroads, all of this. And again, not a racial thing. It is okay to take from one ethnic group things that they have learned and adapt it into what you're going to do for your nation. There's nothing wrong with that. That is the way things work. Some cultures and some societies might advance and find things faster than another. That doesn't disparage from the other society. It doesn't disparage from the other ethnic group. It's just who happened to have got there first because of priorities, or many other things that have nothing to do with race, right? This isn't about race. This is about your culture. Do you accept that Western-style governance is the way of the world? If you accept that, and you can hate that all you want, right? But it is what has happened. Look at the United Nations. The concept of a nation-state is what has prevailed, not the concept of tribalism. Not that concept. But that is the concept that Africans have refused to let go when attempting to try, and they don't try, they simply fall into the seats of the former government that was created by colonialism, these Western-style democracies. They take it over, they make it tribal, they embezzle, they're corrupt, and the whole thing falls apart. And in situations like South Africa, they give one man, one vote too, and here's where I'm backing up Africans in South Africa. The problem was that Africans had been oppressed for so long, that there was such an emotional cry for change, that there was so much pent-up hatred and anger for the apartheid system, that in 1994, at the end of apartheid, by opening up universal suffrage, one man, one vote, South Africa shot itself in the head. Because now a mass of angry, emotional, uneducated in the way that Western-style democracies should work, were given the right to vote, and what you ended up with was cronyism in the ANC, a failed government, a failed state, and now the rise of Malema and other communists, racial communists, who seek to destroy the entire structure of Western democratic ideals entirely, which will lead to the end of South Africa. So, the other thing that I wanted to point out is that, again, this is, to prove this is not racial, this is cultural and educational, this is the same problem we're having in the United States. Again, I don't sit here and say, United States is the greatest democracy ever, the greatest republic ever. I don't believe in universal unlimited suffrage. I believe it is the end to all democratic systems. So here, a multicultural society, one of the biggest problems you see, for example, as I'm making this video on October 7th, is the government shutdown. So right now, we have not been able to come to terms on a budget. Why not? For example, the Democrats on the left want a provision in the budget that will pay for health care for undocumented, or people call illegal immigrants. The right says no. Who's right here? I don't think that matters. It's the issue for the channel, although you know politically where I stand on this. But the issue is what people have done. Uneducated United States voters. And I'm saying that because I used to teach high school civics, and how little value was placed on Americans learning government and the functions of government and electoral processes and all this. What we have done on the left and even on the right is voted for people who yelled out enough and waved a flag high enough and said, I will give you what you want. So people on the left, they want to see undocumented illegal immigrants taken care of, regardless of whether or not that is what is good for us as a nation in the long run, for our budget, for taxes, all of that. They want this, they want it, so they've elected people who said, I will give it to you. Instead of an educated electorate, people, a limited group of people who can vote based on certain educational requirements or landowning requirements or property requirements or wealth requirements, people who are invested in the system, them being given the right to vote, who might be able to understand, hey, this might hurt me to vote no on this in the short term, but in the long run, it'll be better for my state and my country and better for me. Therefore, I'm going to elect the person who thinks that same way, as opposed to the demagogue who's just going to say, I'm going to give you what you want. So, yes, saying that Africans right now are incapable of governing themselves in line with the now understood, the ideal form of government, the political institution of the Western state, which, whether you like it or not, is what your country must be in order to be competitive in the 21st century. This is just the style that has won out. This is just the form that is the form of all forms, that is accepted and acknowledged by groups like the United Nations. We have gone past tribalism, human sacrifice. We've gone past the hopefully the genocide between different tribal groups. That is long gone. Those are vestiges of a different time. In order to succeed in the 21st century, countries must adapt and become Western-style governments and institutions that protect political representation, property rights, state borders, all of that, the rule of law, that everyone is accountable to the law. Africans have been unable to adapt because of a fundamental lack of education in how these government works and a refusal to understand the cultural differences between the past system of tribalism and the new Western-style democracies. And it doesn't mean you have to give up your culture, your heritage, your traditions. Everyone can still benefit from that and learn about that and preach that and all of that. But in order to succeed, the government itself has to be above tribalism, has to be above racism, has to be above all of that. One man, one vote does not work if the entire electorate is uneducated in how to vote and how governments work. That's why I said, and I brought up Socrates' argument, if you were on a ship, who would you want to pick the captain? The sailors who know how the ship is run, how a ship operates, and know who the best man or woman is to get you from point A to point B? Or do you want the passengers to pick, who will probably just pick the person running for captain who says, I'll give you whatever you want, this will be the best trip ever, we'll have margaritas and mimosas and we'll be fine, but he knows nothing about sailing a ship. The passengers pick that person, everyone crashes and dies. Sailors need to pick the captain. Educated citizens need to pick their government leaders. So this isn't about race. Singapore, not white, great government. Japan, not white, went from destruction at the end of World War II to one of the mightiest economic powerhouses in the world, while also still maintaining their culture and traditions, right? And having a Western-style government. Getting away from tribalism, getting away from clans that they had during the samurai period and things like that. So, it is not a Africans are unable to govern themselves and Africans can't govern Africa. But uneducated Africans in the way of the best form of governance, these Western-style democracies, these Western-style republics, these Western institutions, they are unable to govern because they have a continent with the most riches, the most natural resources. But since the end of the colonial period, so we'll talk about, let's say, the 40s or 50s, so coming on almost 60, 70, 80 years, have been unable to capitalize on all that. It is no longer the fault, if you can say fault, of colonialism. It is no longer the fault of white Europeans. It is the fault that people in an African leadership and the one man, one vote, that system that has elected demagogues who will line their own pockets to the detriment of their own people, that is who is at fault. So yes, saying that South Africa's end was because of one man, one vote at the end of apartheid has nothing to do with race. It has to do with culture and education. And that needs to be made clear. So as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you for the next video.